So by now, I'm sure you've all seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I was gonna do a review of it, but I don't know. I don't think I have that much to say about it really. Which isn't to say it's bad at all. In fact, I think it's really great, like genuinely amazing. But it's just that I don't think there's anything I can really say that hasn't already been said. It's a great part one. I know a lot of people felt cheated by that and also think it wasn't marketed well as a part one. But you gotta remember, Infinity War wasn't marketed as a part one either, and a lot of people felt cheated by that movie's cliffhanger ending too. But we've all come around on it since. I'm sure audiences felt that way about Empire Strikes Back or Back to the Future Part 2 as well. It's just inherent to these cliffhanger endings. Anyway, beautiful animation, some great new characters, loved Hobie in particular, some unexpected cameos that made for some really funny moments. I know cameos have gotten a bit of a bad rap recently, thanks to so much Marvel and Star Wars content, and stuff like Space Jam 2, which is just all cameos. But I think for something like this, you can do it in a fun, unexpected way. The cameos here don't feel like needless fan service. It was always there for a reason. Or it was just funny, which is fine too. But thankfully, none of it felt like it was there to make the audience point and clap, which is what I was kind of worried about. There's also the meta aspect of this movie too, which I loved. Reminded me a lot of the Matrix sequels, where it's sort of commenting on this nature of storytelling and specifically like the hero's journey and how these heroes in stories always must have their loved ones die, especially like mentor figures. It can kind of feel like these stories are going for the motions. I felt that a bit when Aunt May died in No Way Home, to be honest, even though I still like that movie. Hot take, I know. I've seen plenty of people saying it doesn't really make sense if you think about it, but it's not really meant to make perfect sense literally as long as it makes sense thematically. At least that's how I see it. I was also impressed by how tonally consistent this felt, while also going for a slightly different tone nearly every scene, but pulling it off in a way where you don't really notice it. It goes from surrealist comedy to almost fourth wall breaking comedy to Looney Tunes type shenanigans to physical Buster Keaton esque comedy to funny bits of dialogue to scenes that take themselves very seriously and are very grounded to scenes that also take themselves seriously but where it's way more fantastical and just not based in any kind of reality. It's also able to take a character like the Spot, who's treated like a joke for the first half, and then in the back half of the film turn him into a pretty scary, threatening villain who becomes unrecognizable from being the same guy who was fumbling around with the ATM at the start. But also, it doesn't feel like they just switched up the character. I don't know, I felt where they took that character was very impressive, even though that character isn't even in the movie for very long. A lot of what he does is off screen. But back to talking about the tone. I find tone in a lot of these movies to be kind of messy, especially as they're getting a bit more ambitious in their approach to comedy. It used to just be quippy dialogue, but now it's more surreal comedy or reference humor. And yeah, sometimes comedy in these big movies, especially superhero movies, Marvel movies, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We obviously see a lot of emotional scenes nowadays being undercut with a quippy, self aware joke, but also For Love and Thunder, for example, was all over the place, partially because that movie is not grounded in any sort of reality, and then it tries to be in certain scenes. It's very uneven. You have reference humor in that movie, you have this one character who's animated, but then you have more serious elements. Like the start of that movie is Gorda Godbutcher's daughter dying, and a large part of that movie is about Jane Foster dying of cancer, and it just doesn't mesh well with the comedy. I think in part the medium of animation really gives the filmmakers the ability to branch out with the film's tone and how grounded in reality or how fantastical they want each scene to be. They can just go from 0 to 100 in an instant just for a quick joke, and as an audience member, you'll just accept that way more than when that happens in a live action movie. Live action movies can also do a mix of different styles of humor and be really fantastical too, though. Just look at Scott Pilgrim, for example. But that movie knows its limitations and what the audience is willing to accept. It's not going to go for a really emotional, tear jerking scene. This does. And it does really overwhelm you with all these conflicting emotions, but it works because I don't think any of the emotional moments are compromised by any of the comedic moments. The closest example I can think of in terms of the tone is coincidentally another multiverse movie, that being Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I do really, really like that movie, but I do feel that sometimes the comedy does get in the way of the more emotional, serious moments of that film. And I know a lot of other people feel that way too. I really didn't feel that it was too egregious, but I think this movie goes for a similar style in how it's able to play around with its own tone and genre to this extent, but it pulls it off just a little bit better by never putting a joke somewhere that made me go, oh, maybe that should have been taken out. I know that's a pretty subjective feeling, but also, this movie does seem to be resonating with audiences pretty damn well. And similar to Everything Everywhere, when this movie came out, and I know this isn't the best mark of quality to go off of, but it got a really high score on Letterboxd. But the score doesn't really seem like it's going to be going down like Everything Everywhere did. I mean, we'll see. A lot of people seem to turn on Everything Everywhere, and that might happen for this movie, but I don't know. For some reason, I just don't see it happening, at least not to the same extent. Anyway, I guess I did have some stuff to say about this movie. I really just wanted to hone in on the tone though, seeing as that isn't being discussed as much. Also, forgot to mention, but the score by Daniel Pemberton is just incredible. I absolutely loved it. And again, it's also a mix of different styles, so it goes along with how the movie is a mix of different tones. So, yeah, this is a fantastic, overwhelming movie that I can't really find any faults in, aside from like the sound mix, but apparently that's the faults of theaters or something. I don't know. But yeah, aside from that, no real faults. I think this is even better than the first movie. For me, it felt more emotionally resonant. So I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. Or I would, if it weren't for the fact that this was just a copy of The One starring Jet Li, in which Jet Li must fight alternate reality versions of himself. So, 0 out of 10. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but if you blatantly steal from a beloved masterpiece such as The One starring Jet Li, that's an automatic 0 out of 10 in my book. It's just, it's shameful, really. Yeah, bad movie. Sorry, everyone.